For a third night in a row, at 3:30 a.m., Boy was awakened by the uneasiness of an unknown stillness, his petite body shaking with fear as he cautiously surveyed the surroundings of his modest bedroom. His panicked eyes pierced into the darkness like daggers. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread swaddling him tightly. The sudden swift movement of Zandoli reverberated on the wooden wall, shattering this unnerving silence, only to be joined by the frightful wooing of the usually muted Jumbie bird. There was something nefarious and sinister in the atmosphere.
Every time I pass, you look at me. Every time I pass, you look at me. I gotta tell me, mama, don't send me down there.
He sensed a strange presence nearby, but could see nothing as he looked out into the perpetual blackness. As the early morning sunlight danced across Boy's face, he was awakened by his parents' muffled conversations. He had no idea when he drifted back to sleep. However, for the past 3 days, he had grown to expect this pre-dawn visitor that lurked in the darkness. Residue from the early morning encounter lingered in his being. It taunted him. The darkness echoed throughout the morning sun rays. This benevolent entity mocked him in the early morning sunlight. His mother's hushed, worried tone jolted him back into the present. Boy quietly sat up on his bed, placing his ear on the partitioned wall, eavesdropping on his parents' conversation. He sensed an urgency and anxiety in his mother's voice when she spoke. For the last 3 days, she relentlessly badgered his father to use their savings to have him baptized. She rehashed the same dream to her husband every morning. In her dream, she was visited by her deceased grandmother. She believed this to be a bad omen. She was not keen on dismissing this dream. Unlike her, Boy's father, Percy, was not easily convinced about this apparent vision. Percy and his wife discussed the subject passionately in whispered tones. He was unmoved by his wife's outlandish claims. She was no soothsayer, no medium, or no prophetess, nor was she able to articulate the looming danger. He was not willing to invest the family's minuscule savings based on his wife's fleeting dream. Their roof was leaking, the house had creaky floorboards, and Boy needed extra math lessons, those he considered to be a matter of priority. He speculated the reasons for his wife's hysteria was largely due to the events transpiring within the village. Boy's mother was much like the entire community of Talbaro, lived in a state of heightened panic since the sudden disappearance of young Jacinta on Sunday last. The well-mannered teen had seemingly vanished without a trace. Speculative stories sprung up every day and everywhere like wildfire. Suspicion fell upon anyone in the village if the slightest of details did not hold up regarding their whereabouts on that Sunday. The lush green landscape, clean fresh air, and unblemished blue skies of this quaint little countryside now held a dark secret. What happened to that girl, and where could she be? Boy's mother was also taken prisoner to the fear that swept through the community. She herself recounted every moment as she meticulously pondered on the what-ifs of that day. This mystery, her own mother's intuition, coupled with night terrors, had her on edge. She dwelled in a place of constant anxiety. This morning, she had her own trepidation about sending Boy to school. Before Boy's father headed off to work, he placed a kiss on his worried wife's forehead. Percy peered into his son's room to see if he was awake. Boy, hearing the thumping of his father's boot, quickly pretended to be asleep. Percy stood at his son's doorway, gazing upon him sleeping innocently. He pondered for a brief moment. Did his wife receive some sort of sign? As Percy lifted his head, he could see the tiny rays of sunlight sneaking through the holes in the roof, a reminder of the things that needed to be fixed, a sign of his own. As Boy Boy's mother readied him for school this morning, she did so in a trance-like state, running scenarios through her head, attempting to decode his grandmother's visit. What did it mean? She clutched Boy Boy tightly to her chest as she began reciting the Our Father prayer. In that moment, they both felt a sense of safety. Before bidding him off, she reminded him, "Go straight to school. Do not take a ride from anyone except your uncle if you see him. Collect your fruit bag from Bobo Sean and the junction, but make that your only stop. And most importantly, do not go playing behind the school." Talbot RC was an average-sized concrete structure that held approximately 13 classrooms. The building stood next to an open cricket and football field, which surrounded by thick foliage and an assortment of exotic fruit trees. Further into the lush, dense thicket held an uncontaminated sanctuary. Tucked safely inside were small streams filled with crystal clear waters that gave life to a variety of crabs, crayfish, cascadoo, and other aquatic wildlife. Macaws perched on tree branches were no rare sighting, nor the blue jay or the green parrot. The air fresh, crisp, and clean. The soothing songs of water trickling softly over rocks which formed a tiny waterfall. The ever-lurking bamboos chattered with each soft blowing breeze. Seeing the green mackerel rarely raised an alarm, nor did it command any fear. The slithering serpent existed without bothering or being bothered. The community respected the stretch of forest that they aptly called Bois Lair. It was a place of immaculate beauty and wonder. This morning, the schoolyard was abuzz with the excitement of childish wonder. The girls skipped giddily as they played hopscotch and jacks. The boys engaged in early morning cricket and football. The usual rambunctious suspects engaged in their mischievous activities as the morning sun drizzled down like softly melted butter on their playful glee. The students perspired under its unforgiving glare. Boy Boy participated in his usual morning dose of cricket in the open field, the reddish-pink hue of the sand already staining his khaki shorts. He was no star batsman, but definitely had an A-class fielder. As the previous events of that morning loomed over him, he shrugged it off. Boy Boy basked in the moment, even as whatever grim entity stalked him. The teachers barely paid attention to their pupils this morning. They fluttered around from class to class. Some stood off to the side, participating in salacious early morning gossip. Mrs. Valerie, the principal, hastily walked with a pen and clipboard in her hand, carrying with her a card expressing the faculty's thoughts and prayers. She took her duties not just as vice principal, but card bearer very sternly. Her job this morning? To ensure every member of staff signed this solemn symbol of sympathy and solidarity before Jenny, the school's canteen manager, arrived. It was indeed a somber morning for the staff at Talbot RC. Jenny's daughter had gone missing some days prior. Although urged to take more time to deal with this, Jenny thought it best to return promptly to work, perhaps something to keep her distracted. Whoop! The ball ricocheted from the bat's impact, volleying into the sky. Surely this was a six. Instinctively, Boy Boy raced after it. The ball flew unnaturally high as though it soared with wings across the morning sky, disappearing into the forested area. Boy Boy's feet did not fail him. It carried him like a bullet into the dense cathedral of trees. The further in it carried him, the less sunlight followed, until its blazing rays had completely abandoned his tiny frame, shining no more. His feet kept moving faster and faster. He was running from himself, his shadow, his thoughts, his anxiety, his night terrors. His heart and legs were racing. Perhaps fear or childish ignorance, but all he knew, he had to recover this ball. Suddenly, his shoe snagged in between the protruding roots of the zabuka tree, twisting and snapping his bony ankles, tossing him across the forest floor like discarded foliage. The squirrel monkey shrieked with terror as the macaws took a mimic exit into the sky, and serpent hissed and posturized its cold, scaly, slimy body. Boy's tiny frame spun down the uneven, rugged landscape, his limp body tumbling from side to side as he capsized down an embankment. Boop! His skull slamming against the cold stones of the riverbed. His body laid stagnant and contorted. Everything stood silent. A wave of peace gushed over him. Boy felt his body tingling as he stood. There was a lightness to him. His body glided as he looked around in awe, surveying the landscape from a new pair of eyes, seeing for the first time. In the distance he heard unrecognizable chatters, but he knew it was the unmistakable voices of children. From his peripheral view, Boy observed an intricately woven basket-brimmed object moving up off to the left. Puzzled yet intrigued, stripped of fear, he followed. As his feet touched the earth, he could feel the tingling sensation of his toes behind him. Nearing closer, he observed the large basket-woven object to be a hat, and now several figures stood before him. The forest grew larger, quieter, darker, and colder, the air static, still, and frigid. The mysterious Hat Brigade disbanded in gleeful laughter. Again he followed. The aroma of fresh fish began filling his nostrils. Boy made his way down the stream. He could see children playing and catching fish. None of them he had ever seen before. One little girl sank on the bank, happily eating her raw crawfish, splashing her feet in the water. As his eyes drifted down, they grew wide with confusion. Her feet were pointed backwards. She tilted her hat back, revealing a broad smile and white eyes. She signaled for him to come over.
Every time I pass